Hello, everybody, and happy weekend to you all. Welcome back to another episode of Saturday Sofa Safari. And today we are embarking on a very special journey. And the reason why I chose this particular adventure is because actually this Sunday, tomorrow, I was supposed to board a plane to make my way to Uganda to host the Best of Uganda Safari. But seeing that I cannot get there now, I would like to share some past experiences with all of you. So no safari vehicle to jump in today, only a comfortable pair of hiking boots needed. A good walking stick is a must when you embark on a gorilla safari. And yeah, let's jump straight into it. A gorilla track or gorilla tracking isn't just there's a gorilla family out, day over. It's a very eventful kind of day, and there's a lot that takes place. And it starts off from that moment you lay your head down to rest on that particular night before the journey. And because gorilla act very much the same way as us as humans do, they cozy up and rest and sleep at night. And the interesting thing is that these animals create a comfortable nest for themselves to go and lay in. Similar to us making up a nice comfortable warm bed, the gorillas do this as well. And what they usually do is they would find a nice bare open area on the forest floor, and they will usually line this area with pieces of vegetation to make it a little bit more comfortable for their night's rest. And each individual within the family will create their own nest, which is quite special. And mom, obviously, as caring as moms are, will share her nest with her baby. And this will be the place that they obviously lay down to rest. And then the next morning at first light, they wake up and they make their way further and deeper into the forest looking for something to eat. But with us, we also cozy in at night, have a good night's rest, wake up for a good breakfast, and then usually what would happen is we will make our way to the Bwindi headquarters, and what will happen there is we will get to sit down while our guides, or our drivers on the ground, discuss with the authorities as to which group we are going to be tracking on that particular day, which family group, because there's multiple families in and around Bwindi Impenetrable Forest. So our guides will chat to the authorities to see, okay, where we will get placed. But during this, we don't just sit there and kind of ponder and wonder what's gonna happen today. There is entertainment for us, and this entertainment comes in form of local ladies that live around Bwindi, and they show off their traditional dances for us, which is pretty special. And it is quite an eventful, cheerful, and uplifting experience, which is pretty cool to see and pretty cool to be a part of. But then after that, what will happen is we will be introduced to our guide for the day, so the lead guide taking us into the forest. He will give us a brief as to the group we're tracking, how many members live in this group, dynamics, so how many silverback, how many females, how many babies if we're lucky. And then after this briefing, usually from that point we set off on foot, or it's a short drive to a starting point, and we make our way into the forest on foot. And to me, what really makes a gorilla trekking safari so incredible is, yes, the hour with the gorilla is absolutely phenomenal, and words cannot describe how incredible it is. It's truly something that will only be understood once experienced. But that walk through this forest, if you've ever spent time in a rainforest before, you will know what I'm trying to get to. It is absolutely phenomenal. Lush green vegetation, monstrous tall sky, or trees that touch the clouds, or so it seems. It is just so beautiful being in and around those forests. I mean, the sounds, the calls, there's so much life in the rainforest, so much that has been discovered and so much that still has not been discovered. And in fact, new species get discovered in rainforests across the globe every single day. So just being within an area that is so full of life, so full of color, is just such an overwhelming experience. It really is phenomenal. And during this track, it's not just a walk in, tie yourself, spend an hour with gorillas and walk out. It's a walk in, and throughout this walk, your guides share the incredible knowledge they have with regards to the forest and how the gorillas move through the forest. They share stories as to how gorillas feed, what they feed on, and they give you visual representations. They find cool little creatures along the way, like chameleons or whatever it may be, lizards, bird life. They stop, they identify, and they chat to you about it, and they just kind of provide an all-rounded great trekking experience through these forests. It really is something special. But the great thing is, during all this, we're buying ourselves time for a somewhat of an easier track. Because remember, I mentioned nesting behavior, where these gorillas go down to lie and sleep at night. This is usually the nesting site for the night, unless they go or something disturbs them throughout the night. For example, there are insects in these forests that are excruciating when they crawl on you and bite you. It hurts so bad. And so if these biting ants infest one of the gorilla nests, this is obviously not a pleasant way to sleep, so they will wake up, shake them off, and then move and look for a place where there are no ants to disturb them, and then sleep further over there. So what happens is, during this track, while the guides are sharing all this cool information with us, there are teams of trackers that head out long before the sun even rises, because these trackers spend time with these families even long after the group of guests have left. They will stay with them for research purposes. They will then note where they have made their nest for that night, take a GPS coordinate, and then the next morning, prior to us even, we still in dreamland, dreaming about how cool this experience is going to be, they get out into the forests on foot and they track down these animals for us. So from that nesting site, they then start tracking, looking for signs of feeding, where they're breaking branches, droppings, footprints, where the vegetation is pushed flat as the gorillas move through. And so what will happen is, during this course of the track, your lead guide will have a radio, and he'll be in contact with this tracking team at all times, and they will then inform us where these gorillas are moving, which direction we should take. So basically, they're helping us in finding a shorter route to get to the gorillas. But once we do, this is where the really cool stuff happens, because you're obviously now going to spend an hour with gorilla. And I mean, this track can be anywhere from 5 to 6 to 7 hours of walking through this incredible forest, to as little as 10 minutes. My shortest gorilla track was 10 minutes, because they were right next to the main road. But once you're in there, you come across what they refer to as a family, or a group of gorilla. And the dynamics can vary from family to family, but it's usually dominated by one big silverback, so a big dominant male. And below him could be a lower ranked silverback or a blackback or two young males, and then a group of females, and if you get super lucky, some babies. And on average, a family group can be anywhere between 10 and 12 individuals, but there are certain families within Bwindi that have numbers of up to 19 different individuals within a family. So that's like a mega gorilla group, which is pretty cool. But you then make your way in, and usually what will happen is, once you approach these gorillas, they will just be feeding for the most part, because up to a quarter of their day they spend time feeding on shrubs and bushes and vegetation all around the forest, either floors or canopies, because they can climb trees, and they make their way up and look for suitable things to eat. But they can also feed on bark, snails, ants, insects that they can find. But this is a seldom occurrence. But for the most part, these animals are feeding. And this happens during the cooler parts of the morning. And then often what you would find, because you usually come across the gorilla families a little bit later on in the morning, the heat of the day is starting to set in. So they tend to look for a little spot to siesta, or the adults at least, to go lie down and have a nice rest. But then if you are lucky enough and you've got some sub-adults or even babies within a group, the action never stops when you spend time with them, because they are forever busy. They're running around, jumping, doing their thing, and having an absolute blast, and obviously entertaining the guests that get to be lucky enough to be there and experience that behavior. And I've had many a moments where I have laughed out loud at the clumsy things these animals do. And I think what really attracts me to these creatures is that we share 98% of our genetics with these animals. So there's so many similarities. It is really mind-blowing. It is really cool. But then with regards to gorilla dynamics, as I mentioned, it'll be a dominant silverback, a silverback ranked just below him, or a few blackbacks, females, and babies. But the cool thing with gorillas is that both males and females, up to 60% of them, once they've reached their maturity, they will leave the family and they will go look for other gorillas in different and separate parts of the forest, either join a group that has a dominant silverback or look for a younger male who is looking to establish a territory and become dominant. And what this allows, and nature works in incredible ways, is that it'll prevent inbreeding, which is really phenomenal. And the cool thing with this as well is that you never know what to expect when entering the Bwindi Impenetrable Forest. On one of my recent safaris, got to approach a group who had just come out of a pretty vicious battle about a week prior, and they were quite a large group. If I recall correctly, I think there were 14. There was a big fight between a male and a female, the two males, two silverbacks. The one we got to spend time with was ripped horribly on his neck, on his face, on his back, his arms, his fingers were bitten half off. It was quite a gruesome experience, but it's just the day-to-day life of a gorilla, I suppose. And what actually happened is when this male came in, he didn't want the territory that he was in. He just wanted a few females, and he stole 3 or 4 females with him, and off he went. So this prior extremely dominant male had now lost a few females to this particular male. And it's such an interesting dynamic listening to the guides share stories of particular families and what has happened to them throughout their days. It's really a great experience. But then looking at gorillas out in the wild, on average they live for about 40 years, which is a pretty long time. And the reason being is their maturity levels or to get to their maturity level, it takes a little bit of time. Once mom gives birth to a baby, it is a great celebration for both rangers and gorilla families. It's a special event. But then males and females will practice parental care, which is so special. A lot of the time with wild animals, you find that only the female will look after the babies. Male doesn't really care and he moves on. Whereas in gorilla families, males and females are very hands-on when it comes to raising babies into adulthood. But research says that infants are classified as babies or infants until they reach about 3.5 years of age, and then they're only classified as fully grown adults from about 8 years old. So that between that infant and adult stage is that sub-adult kind of phase, and then they move on from there. Males between 8 and 12 years old start developing or are considered blackbacks, so that adult stage, but then only become silverbacks at about 12 years old, and that's when they can start looking for either territories or females of their own, and or fight their fathers for females who he had stolen from other families or that have joined him over the past years, because often you'd find moms, sisters, aunts of a particular male, if he becomes dominant within the group they're living in, they tend to break off and move away and go look for other families because they know they do not want to breed with the same bloodline. It's absolutely fascinating as to how these animals work, and they're just truly special. I do hope that every single one of you watching this, if you have not yet embarked on a gorilla tracking safari, I do hope that one day you get lucky enough to do so, because going in there and experiencing this isn't just an incredible wildlife experience, and by far one of the biggest African bucket list must-dos, but the value that you're adding to a gorilla's life is pretty special. And this is what I want to end off with today, is that last year I got to spend about an hour and a half with one of the gorilla doctors, Dr. Fred, during a safari, and we were sitting at Bahoma at the guest house chatting, or at the lodge should I say, chatting, and basically myself and the guests were just sitting asking him questions about his work and the value us as tourists are adding to gorillas in general. And it is quite tremendous, because I had asked him over the years, and it's only been a recent thing. In 1991 they started the gorilla habituation process, and only 2 years later, in 1993, were the gorillas habituated enough for the first group of tourists to go in and visit them. Because what wild gorillas will do 95% of the time, if you approach them, they get up and they run. You won't see them again. It's going to be a mission to track them and find them. You'll be out there all day looking for them. So it's a 2-year process to get them habituated enough and used to the presence of humans around them before people can come in. Fast forwarding to now, one of my questions that I had asked Dr. Fred back then is, what impact have us as humans and tourists visiting Uganda had? What have you seen in your research in terms of impacting these animals? Has it been positive? Has it been negative? And his answer was quite uplifting, because a gorilla tracking experience is not cheap. The permits are not cheap, but we, at least after I had received that answer, knew that, okay, there's great positivity coming out of this. We're paying a lot of money to go and experience this, but the money is going into the right places. And his answer to me after I'd asked this question was, because the locals and gorillas still get hunted daily for bushmeat, which is quite sad, but individuals who live around Bwindi Impenetrable Forests have started realizing that poaching these animals, or a dead gorilla, is of a lot less value to them than a gorilla that's alive. Because obviously gorillas that are alive attract a lot of tourists like myself, like yourself, if you have been gorilla tracking, or if you are still hoping to get out there. We are adding great value by coming into their country, and the education that these people now living around these forests are receiving are incredible, and their conservation efforts are just absolutely inspiring, and how they have changed their ways to adapt to allow these animals to live in areas they once lived in. Like the pygmy people used to live out in these forests, deep into the rainforests, and this is where home was. And when this whole conservation project started, they obviously got removed and forced to live on the outskirts. But with this came educational programs, and it's uplifting not only their personal lives, but their communities there, because of the tourists that are coming in. But furthermore, I had asked him about habituated and wild gorillas and what the differences are there in terms of how their efforts and our efforts going in as tourists to visit them, the gorillas that is, how is that affecting their lives? Have they seen better reproductive results and longevity results in wild groups of gorilla, or the more habituated or tame groups of gorilla? And his answer was quite fascinating. And as I had mentioned, he told me that wild gorilla at the sight of humans will kind of just drop everything and run. They go for it, they run away. Whereas the habituated gorillas that are now used to the presence of humans tend to not run. They're okay with people moving into an area. And the cool thing is that he mentioned infant mortalities have dropped tremendously in and amongst the habituated families, because they're spending less time running. They're not running away from humans. They can spend more time feeding, they can spend more time looking after their babies or grooming, whatever it may be. They're also not so stressed. So their health and their safety in general is a lot better when it comes to the habituated groups. So that's one massive positive that comes out of us as humans embarking on one of the most coolest adventures you can ever imagine into a rainforest to spend time with gorillas is that it's not only bettering your life because you've experienced something really cool, in turn you're bettering the lives of wild mountain gorillas. And the fact that there are just over 1,000 wild mountain gorillas left today, it is a biggie. It really makes a world of difference. But I hope that you enjoyed this journey with me into Bwindi Impenetrable Forest today. And I really do hope that every single one of you that have watched this get to go and experience an hour with one of the coolest primates you could ever imagine. But until next time, have a great day, enjoy the rest of the time on your sofa, and I will see you in future episodes. Bye bye.